With the characteristic of lacking economic importance, art film is still regarded as valuable in the film industry. Art film is characterized for its unique cinematic style and defined convention of cause and effect narrative form. Directors such as David Lynch, Sergei Eisenstein, Ingmar Bergman, Wong Kar-wai have all won reputation, resources, and status in the filming industry. They were studied across history, and their work and theory still stand an essential place for learning cinema. So, why art film is so important and how is it challenging commercial films? Before we jump into the question, let's start with the major feature of art film. In classical films, the story is motivated by its narrative form, while in art film, audiences are hard to follow the narrative due to the lack of goal and background of the characters and its loosening of casual relations. So, why people still value art films and why do we need to study them? According to Botwell, the art cinema motivates its narrative by two principles: realism and authorial expressivity. The art cinema defines itself as a realistic cinema, real location and real problem, such as neorealism, the new wave, reality especially like violence and sex, topics that violate the production code of pre-1950 Hollywood, can be seen a lot in art film. But there is one more interesting thing in reality is the real people. Psychologically complex character, such as David Lynch Pete in Lost Highway, Frank in Blue Velvet, they lead to this narrative form as psychological causation. Most of the narrative elements that we can see in classical films are unclear, including characters' desire, goals, vague choices, and unclear ending. That's why we feel weird. As audiences are hard to understand art films, most of us have no idea what the film is talking about because director chooses not to tell you. But to be honest, that's life. Classical film is fascinating for its lies. We would think the story seems reasonable, acceptable, because psychologically people like to find answers and causes when bad things happen. It's much closer to the reality when watching an art film. While classical film cuts out the boring parts and creates the visual fantasies, like Disney. The plot is mostly told with other people's interest. Filmmakers know how to tell an attractive story so that you would buy tickets. As an art film, it functions the opposite. The story is told expressively through autobiographical events. The story in art film is based on directors' experiences, especially childhood, dreams, and fantasies. David Lynch's inspiration comes from many of his dreams and childhood. Audiences are watching art films through director's view or mind. Director comes forward of the films. He or she is more to be considered the author of the movie than is the writer of the screenplay. The concept is known by auteur theory. According to Botwell, the author is the central component in an art film. The meaning of watching art film is reading the intelligence of the author rather than the story itself. In the classical films, the story can raise questions like who did it, how, and why. But in art films, this question becomes who is telling the story, how is this story being told, and why is the story being told this way. So the author actually becomes the foreground of the story rather than the story itself, which answers the question of why commercial films value art filmmakers and even hire them for investment. It is said that narrative intelligence can be recognized in art film. The art film represents the director. It shows his style, his creativity, and potential. And it becomes a portfolio that helps the director to gain more resources to make more films.
Please.
Therefore, when we are watching art films, we are actually sensing the director's ability and style. While in auteur theory, it is said that filmmakers' style can be invariable. An imitation of classical narration form is getting easier to guess, which leads to the urgent requirement of creativity and style difference for the industry. With the rising of art film, the risk of investing film is lower. Commercial film can learn from an art film. An art film is used to shape and influence the environmental condition. It is what pushing the filming industry forward. In conclusion, by creating new possibilities in filmmaking, art film must be seen as an adversary to commercial film. The end of dynamic and adaptable director behind art film helps getting a lower risk in investing film. It is essential to keep record for the unusual style and narrative form to help the industry advance.